Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Congress may be struggling to pass legislation, but it's not slowing down when it comes to oversight. Investigations in 2026 are moving faster, stretching wider, and pulling in companies, universities, and nonprofits that may not see themselves as obvious targets. Joining me to break down what's driving this moment and what smart preparation really looks like is partner at Morgan Lewis, Amanda Robinson. Ms. Robinson, it's great to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Terry. Good to be here.
Your firm has tried to forecast the expectations for congressional oversight hearings and investigations for 2026. Let's start our conversation today with the factors that might be making your crystal ball a little cloudy. What is uniquely different about the 2026 environment?
So in a midterm year, election year, essentially, congressional investigations often becomes one of the primary ways lawmakers influence the policy conversation. And that's unique to 2026 versus 2025, for example. So passing major legislation is difficult under the best of circumstances. But it becomes especially challenging when the House and Senate are closely divided, so there's slim majorities, and the legislative calendar is shortened by campaigning and district work periods. So as a result, oversight activity, hearings, investigations, letters, and committee reports often become the most visible and flexible tool Congress has to advance priorities.
Are you seeing them move in that direction so far?
Absolutely. Although it's notable, right, that in 2026, I would say the biggest issue is continuity. Many investigations currently underway are not brand new initiatives. Instead, they build on multi-year investigatory records that committees have already developed. This is particularly true in areas such as healthcare, pricing, technology platforms, national security issues involving, for example, China, and workplace practices. Because committees have already gathered documents and held hearings on these topics, it's relatively easy for them to continue oversight without starting from scratch. But again, here in this midterm election year, we're seeing members highlight issues that really resonate with voters to apply pressure to regulators or private actors and shape policy debates.
Are you sensing that the hearings that are being held now and the investigations that are underway are really about fact-finding, or sometimes there's a sense that these are just really about headline generation?
Both, honestly, and it depends on the topic, but the political environment certainly shapes how investigations unfold. In an election year, oversight is often designed not only to gather information, as you've said, but also really what I'd call to create public accountability. Here, high-profile hearings, especially those involving corporate executives or government officials, can generate significant media attention and help frame policy debates heading into the election season.
So for agencies that get pulled into oversight hearings, adjacent companies, certainly universities and other nonprofits are getting pulled in. What is the practical risk profile that you're seeing for these organizations right now as a result of congressional oversight?
Yeah, that's a good question. When people think about congressional investigations, they often picture subpoenas or dramatic hearings on Capitol Hill. But in reality, most investigations begin much earlier and much more quietly. Typically, the first step is a committee letter requesting documents, data, and explanations of specific corporate or institutional practices. Now, these letters can request a wide range of materials: internal emails, policy documents, compliance materials, or data related to pricing or business practices. Now, while these requests are technically voluntary, organizations often treat them seriously because they signal that the committee is building an investigatory record. So that's really the sort of initial focus or initial actions that Congress will take. Of course, after receiving documents, committees frequently conduct staff briefings or transcribed interviews. Now, these sessions allow committee staff to ask detailed questions and clarify issues before deciding whether a public hearing is necessary. And in many investigations, the majority of fact-finding occurs at this stage. Public hearings are typically used much more strategically.
Your report also notes that many of these investigations are falling under a framework or an umbrella of national security. How is that umbrella, allowing congressional investigators to bring in all kinds of different focus areas.
Yeah, so you're exactly right. National security framing is a huge trend that we're seeing in congressional investigations. Now, traditionally, national security oversight focused on defense contractors, intelligence agencies, and military programs. Now, today, however, congressional committees increasingly apply a national security lens to a much broader range of industries. That would be supply chains, technology infrastructure, semiconductor manufacturing, data governance, and academic partnerships. They're all being investigated and examined through the lens of a strategic competition, particularly with China. Now, this shift reflects a growing bipartisan consensus in Washington that economic and technological capabilities are central to geopolitical competition. As a result, companies that operate in sectors such as advanced technology, biotech, telecom, or critical minerals may find themselves drawn into congressional investigations even if they have never previously interacted with national security regulators.
I'm speaking with Amanda Robinson. She's a partner at Morgan Lewis. Amanda, you talk about national security being a very common through line. It seems like one of the other very common through lines is artificial intelligence. You can't have a hearing on the Hill on any topic that doesn't somehow include AI. What line of questioning there should organizations be ready for?
AI, that's the topic du jour. So one issue that has received particular attention in the AI context is algorithmic pricing, the use of software systems to analyze market data and recommend or automatically adjust prices. Now, litigation involving a property management software company, for example, has drawn significant attention in Washington. Plaintiffs have alleged that the software's pricing recommendations may facilitate what they call coordination among landlords, raising antitrust concerns. These allegations have prompted hearings and broader discussions about whether algorithms that rely on shared market data could enable anti-competitive conduct. Congress has also considered legislation addressing this issue. One example is the Preventing Algorithmic Collusion Act, which has been introduced but has not advanced to enactment. Now, beyond competition concerns, lawmakers are increasingly interested in internal AI governance. Committees frequently ask companies questions such as, who approves the deployment of AI systems? What safeguards exist to detect bias or unintended consequences? What oversight mechanisms exist within the company?
Amanda, your analysis flags that DEI issues continue to be a focus for congressional oversight. When they request internal training materials or communications, what are they really looking for, and how should organizations prepare?
You're exactly right, Terry. DEI remains one of the most politically contested areas of congressional oversight. Republican-led committees in the House have conducted investigations into DEI programs at universities, nonprofit organizations, and entities that receive, for example, federal funding. These inquiries often focus on hiring practices, internal training programs, communications about diversity initiatives, and metrics used to track diversity goals. Investigators frequently request these internal documents, those that you cited, including these training materials, for example. And what they're really examining, for example, is whether federal funding supports programs that they argue may conflict with civil rights laws. At the same time, congressional oversight in this area is occurring alongside broader developments in the courts and executive branch. The Supreme Court's 2023 decision in Students for Fair Admissions v. Harvard held that race-based affirmative action in university admissions violated the Equal Protection Clause. Although the case addressed higher education admissions specifically, it has prompted broader debates about how similar legal reasoning might apply to corporate and employment programs. As a result, congressional oversight operates as part of a broader policy feedback loop. Congressional investigations can highlight issues that regulators or private litigants later pursue, and developments in litigation can in turn prompt further congressional scrutiny.
So let's turn back to where we started. 2026 is an unusual year. It's a midterm election year. Lots of folks trying to make a name for themselves as they prepare for their election campaigns. If you're an agency, staff member, or a company that gets called by a committee, what's your best mode of preparation?
Yeah, so for organizations that may interact with Congress, the key takeaway is that congressional investigations should be viewed not only as a legal issue, but also as a strategic and reputational risk management challenge. Organizations should assess where their operations intersect with current oversight priorities. Areas drawing, as we talked about, particular attention in Congress include AI governance, DEI policies, workplace practices, healthcare pricing, supply chains, and of course, national security. Organizations should ensure that internal documentation aligns with their public statements. Congressional investigations frequently request in these internal communications, compliance materials, and training documents. And then when those materials contradict public messaging, it can quickly become a focal point of an investigation. Companies should recognize that congressional oversight rarely occurs in isolation. Investigations by Congress often overlap with regulatory enforcement actions and private litigation. For example, a congressional inquiry into pricing practices could occur at the same time that regulators are investigating similar issues or private litigants are filing lawsuits. Now, because of this overlap, organizations often benefit from a coordinated response strategy that includes legal counsel, compliance professionals, a government affairs team, and communication specialists.
I've been speaking with Amanda Robinson. She's a partner at Morgan Lewis. Really appreciate that very practical advice. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Terry.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Listen to the Federal Drive on your schedule. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.